Marion.
Yes, I am so excited to have my guest today, Diane Lang, who she and I have known each other for years, and she's not the first time she's been my guest on Leadership Dolce, Sweet Morsels of Wisdom. I am
so excited.
So I am going to do a quick intro, and then I really want to jump into our topic today because it's one of my favorites. We're going to be talking about building boundaries like a boss. And one of the things that we really need to work on, I think everyone could work on building boundaries. So I'm Joanne Newborn, your certified lifestyle and leadership coach with my company Newborn Evolution. And I'm here with my good friend Diane Lang, who is a therapist, a national speaker, an educator, an author, and a certified positive psychology coach. And we were just talking about how things are opening up and we're all over the map again. And Diane is always one to be doing speaking engagements and teaching and coaching and therapy. I mean, she's just amazing. She speaks on various mental and emotional health topics, including happiness and resiliency, stress management, parenting, positive aging, anxiety, and depression in both teens and adults. And she's written 3 books. Oh my God, amazing. And she's been featured all over the place in publications and media, including Good Day Connecticut and Style Connecticut, the Vieira Network, CBS TV, and Fox and Friends. So welcome, Diane. I'm so excited to have you here. And so we're talking about boundaries, and I'd love to just hear your thoughts initially when you hear someone say they're trying to set some boundaries.
Well, thank you for having me, and you made me sound so good. I'm just going to follow you everywhere. Can I just follow you?
Yes,
my
please.
lead all the time. So boundaries is really such a huge topic. And I have so many people, whether it's students, clients, friends, and I know I have struggled with boundaries myself. Absolutely. And I'm not saying that it's only a female issue, because that would not be the case, but it seems to be a majority of females really deal with boundaries and setting boundaries and really self-care and taking care of themselves, putting ourselves as a priority. So when I hear people say to me, I'm not setting good boundaries, or I had a client say this to me, it was 2 weeks ago. She said, I don't even know what boundaries are. And,
That problem.
Yeah. And this is somebody in their 40s. We're not talking about 20s. And this is common. We hear the buzzword boundaries, but what is it and how do we do it and why? So when I hear boundaries and not having them, a few things come to mind, but really one of the first things that come to mind is unworthy. And what I mean by that is when we're not setting boundaries for ourselves, a lot of times it's because we have low self-worth. And that could be from, childhood trauma that you're still holding on to, or it could be you're going through a lot right now and your self-esteem is fluctuating, which is normal, right? When we go through tough times, self-esteem can go up and down, or our self-esteem could be really good in one area, but not in another. Like I have a client who's a lawyer and her self-esteem is through the roof in her career, her finances, her friendships. In her 50s, on her 3rd divorce, and when it comes to relationships, her confidence is like rock bottom. So it could go either way, but usually a lot of times when we have no boundaries, we're people pleasers. We're looking for acceptance and approval from other people, even though it's an inside job. And that kind of really brings me back to that low self-worth and what are you dealing with that's keeping that root issue of low self-worth at this moment, whether it's triggered, when you worked already through it, or it's something you haven't worked through. Because there's always triggers too. Even if you've done the work, something can easily trigger and bring you back there. So that's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah. It's so funny when you mentioned that, like, people don't even know what boundaries are. A long time ago, I had a coach say to me, well, what will you tolerate and what won't you tolerate? And I didn't even know. Sometimes if you're not raised with good boundary setting guidelines, you don't even know. Like you said, people pleasing. So the people pleasing becomes more important than realizing what your boundaries are. And so that I think boundary setting, in some people, the whole thing has to be learned. And in other people, they know, but they're afraid to speak up. And it's a skill set and a muscle that people can build.
Oh, I agree. Boundaries, definitely, if it wasn't learned as a child, Or not even that, if you were raised in an environment of dysfunction, not only were you not taught boundaries, but you might have come from an abusive or neglectful situation where you didn't even think they existed. You didn't ever even see them, hear about them. And the thing about boundaries too is, like you said, it could be a mix of you don't know to set them, but a sign to know that you need to set them. And this is like, I think a great tip for people is when they go, do I need boundaries? Is thinking about if you are doing a lot for other people, if you're not, if you're always giving and not really receiving, and then you're starting to get resentful and angry with certain people every time you do something for them, that's a sign. If every time you do something for a certain person, you're getting stressed, you're getting anxious, you're getting angry and resentful, you need boundaries. And that's a great way to think about it because, if it's an emergency, if somebody asked us for something in an emergency, most of us don't think of that as, people pleaser. You're being there for somebody you love. It's usually the people who know you're a people pleaser who kind of take advantage of it, or you don't set the boundaries for, so they don't even know that it's bothering you, that they're asking too much. So if you're starting to feel it inside and getting that stress, that anxiety, that anger, and that resentment, you need boundaries. And that's a great way to think about it. How do you feel when you're around certain people? How do you feel when you're doing things for them? Did they even ask you to do it, or did you just volunteer? Think of some of those things, and that can kind of help guide you to go, okay, I think I need some boundaries.
Yeah, and a lot of times with work, especially, I mean, every company is changing at rapid pace, putting so much work onto their employees. And I don't think they're doing it like on purpose to say, well, I'm going to cross this person's boundary. But if they know that, so and so is always going to take on extra on their workload, then they're going to go to so and so. They're going to say, well, that person's like a really good worker. They'll take it on. It's fine. I've got to get this done. I have to find someone to do it. So it really is our responsibility, even in our careers, to be the ones to speak up. And we could have these ideas in our head, like people are supposed to treat us this way or supposed to do this. And so in our mind, they're crossing our boundaries. But when we don't tell them what our boundaries are and we don't set up like what we're willing to accept and not accept, nobody knows it. It's not the other person's fault. And yet we make it out to be the other person's fault. Like, I can't believe, my boss is doing this to me, or I can't believe, I have this other project that I have to work on over the weekend. Well, it's really up to you to start to be able to say, no, I can't.
And no is a great boundary. And I love to think of no like this. No is a complete sentence. If you're going to say no, don't explain yourself. Because once you start explaining yourself, two things either happen. You explain yourself so much that you end up giving in and say, okay, I can do it. And then you're mad at yourself. Or you give the other person so much room to jump in and say, but just this one time, or I see where you could fit it in, just do it tomorrow. You said you had a break tomorrow, and then you end up giving in. So if you're going to say no, it has to be a complete sentence. And it's just, nope, wish I could, I can't, or nope, thanks for asking, or nope, maybe next time. And that is it. So no is a boundary. No is an act of self-care, and no is a complete sentence. And I also think that people need to realize self-care alone, just doing self-care, is an act of a boundary because you're putting yourself first. And I know a lot of my clients, and you probably hear this, and it goes both professional and personal, people think of self-care and selfish in the same sentence. Mm-hmm. And I don't want people to think that, because there is a huge difference. When somebody is selfish and they're self-absorbed, it's only about them. And everything they do is just leads back to them. There is no care about the other person. When it's self-care, it's I'm going to do this for me so I can be the best version of me, which in turn will make me be the best mom, the best friend, the best worker, whatever career you're in. So you're doing it with the intention of being able to help others because you're in the best place. So they are not the same. So, and I don't want people, especially females, a lot of times to hear, well, if I do that, I know you're calling it self-care, but am I being selfish? And absolutely not. We need to take care of ourselves first, because we can't give what we don't have. So always remember that sentence. You can't give what you don't have. And if you're in a bad place, a few things happen. Moods and emotions are contagious. So everybody around you is affected. So they might feel like they're walking on eggshells, especially at work. They're now afraid to talk to you, to approach you, even if they have to. They're now coming in defensive because they're afraid, because your mood or your emotion is coming out very negative. And negativity is way stronger than positivity. So remembering that moods and emotions, they're contagious. The other thing is, if you have kids, you're not teaching them boundaries. You want to be a role model. Kids from birth till puberty learn visually. So they learn through role modeling, observation, imitation. So if you're not showing boundaries, if you're not doing it, even if you talk about it, your actions not matching your words, the kids are not learning it. So if we want our kids to learn to take care of themselves and make self-care a priority, which most of us do, then you have to do it yourself so they can learn it by seeing you do it. So really thinking about self-care and selfish are two separate things, and they should not be in the same sentence.
Yeah, that is such a great point. And so many people, like you said, feel like we're being selfish by taking the time we need, yet you can't function if you're burnt out. You can't function if you're stressed out all the time. And I also love that phrase, like if you have an empty cup, you cannot do anything with an empty cup. So you need to have your own cup full before you can give to anybody else. You can't give from an empty space.
It's true. And we will hit burnout. And burnout could be corporate burnout or occupational burnout, they'll call it, but also caregiver burnout. And a lot of times when we think of caregivers, we always think about like nurses, social workers, educators, and they're absolutely caregivers. But I want everybody to know you're a caregiver if you have kids. And we tend to forget that. If you're a mom or dad, you're a caregiver. If you're in the sandwich generation and you're caring for your kids and your parents, what about people who are caregiving in their career and at home? So a lot of us are caregivers. And after, COVID, we also have pandemic burnout. So people are burning out. And that's where you get to a place where you're emotionally, physically, mentally, and spiritually fatigued. You're done. And that could last for a day to a few days to lead into depression, which is something we don't want to do. And the best way to prevent that is self-care. We have self-care and self-soothing, and I just want to put out there, they're different. Self-care is preventative. What am I going to do so I can prevent hitting burnout, so I can prevent stress turning into anxiety and becoming overwhelmed? Self-soothing is, what do I do in the moment when I'm in the moment of having an anxiety attack, or I'm too stressed out and overwhelmed? What will bring me down? What will bring me back to the moment and calm me? So self-soothing is in the moment. Self-care is preventative. Some of them might overlap. Mindfulness can overlap. You can do it as preventative and in the moment, but you need to have both in your emotional toolbox. What am I doing to prevent this? And what am I doing when it happens? What's in my emotional toolbox that I can use at the moment? And what can I use every day to get to that place where I'm taking care of myself so I don't hit burnout, or at least I'm self-aware when I'm getting there and I know what I need to do to stop it.
Yeah. And that's very powerful. Like you mentioned, the toolbox. I'm really big on what tools do we have? And we should be referring to our toolbox as we fill it up. And I like to think of things too in baby steps and building muscles, right? Because people will say to me, well, Joanne, I can't just flip a switch and just go from, not having boundaries to all of a sudden having, these strong boundaries. And I say, it's okay. Let's just take it one baby step at a time. So try something once, see what happens. Now you're starting to build that muscle. You can try it again another time, and you can make it stronger and stronger each time. And each time you do that, it gets easier and easier.
Absolutely.
I work with a lot of companies, and what ends up happening is sometimes, because I am really good with attention to detail and wanting to do the best job, that things will come to me very last minute. And the people that work for the organizations may work, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, but they're like, Joanne can do it over the weekend and it can get it done. So I really had to do that. And it was hard because there is a nervousness around it. Will they not hire me anymore if I, and I was really sort of killing myself. And then I said, you know what, I've got to set boundaries, and I've got to not care whether I'm going to lose the work or not, because my own self-care and my own health of giving myself space to like recoup has to be more important. Otherwise, I'm not even going to be able to do this work. And I did it, and there were no horrible repercussions at all. People were like, oh, you should just let us know. Yeah, sorry. Because they'll just keep asking as long as you keep saying yes.
Right. It's the fear. And we all have fear. And, one thing to think about, like you said, with practice, it gets easier and easier. But remember, the first time you say no, the first time that you give yourself self-care or make yourself a priority, the first time you set up limitations or time limits, whatever you're doing as your boundary, it's going to feel really awkward and uncomfortable because you haven't done it. If it's something you're not doing constantly, you're stepping outside your norm, which is good because we step outside our norm. We're always growing, we're expanding, we're developing. That's a positive, but it brings a lot of fear. And that fear can ruminate, and we'll think about it all the time. So I want you to remember this statistic, which is my favorite because I use it myself, is 90% of what you fear never ever happens.
I love that.
90%. And that's a huge one to know. And out of the 10% left, 5% happens, but not half as bad as you thought. You exaggerated it, catastrophized it into this big thing. And it happens, but nothing really bad. And then 5% actually happens. So if you look at that 95%, you'd be like, wow, you know what? I can breathe. And we let fear paralyze us. And I don't want to give fear a bad name because fear is also a really good skill to have. We want to be able to have that fight or flight, that intuition. If somebody's following us, something is not right, to be aware of it. And fear can be a motivator. Wow, this means a lot to me. So I'm going to practice and practice because I am scared, like public speaking, something like that. It can motivate you. But when you let it paralyze you, that's when it becomes a problem. So really finding out, and, is this a realistic fear, something that's really true? Or am I just fearing over something like anticipatory anxiety? I'm worried about what if when I'm not even there yet. Then remind yourself that 90% of what you fear never happens. And remind yourself that the only constant in the world is change. So even if something doesn't work out, the next week there's going to be something different because everything is temporary. So we have to learn to embrace change. And one of the best ways to do that is to lean into it. The more we fight or resist something, the more stress we add. So just by leaning in, embracing it, whether it's anxiety, whether it's fear, whether it's change, kind of reduces the added stress. So don't fight it, don't resist it, kind of embrace it. Know that this is just part of the world we live in. I mean, we've seen it with COVID. If you weren't aware that change was the norm, just had a look at COVID, how many times it changed. Do you remember last year at this time, we thought we were getting to the end of it. We were in July. It was like everything was done. And then Omicron came in the fall and we were like, oh, here we go. And now we know we have to live with it. And we went from virtual to back in person. And now it's kind of a hybrid lifestyle, which I think is what it's going to be the new norm, especially here. If you're in the New York, New Jersey area, the winters, they'll use Zoom because who wants to drive when it's dark, icy and snowy, and then maybe come out in spring and summer like a bear, hibernate. But it is always about change and fear.
Yeah.
So really being aware of that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the hybrid because a lot of offices now are opening up again. They want people to come in a couple of days a week. And people have, we've adapted to being able to work from home. So there's a big push and pull. And when we're talking about boundary setting, we have to think too, what is it that we ultimately want? Like, what are our priorities? Like, I might not want to go back into the office, but if my priority is, I really love my job and my company and I want to stay here, then maybe I will, make that sacrifice and go back into the office a couple of days a week. If your priority is, I really want this lifestyle where I'm going to work from a home office, then you need to do something about it. I find a lot of people getting upset about the change that's happening. Like you said, we're in a constant state of change. People are getting upset about it, but they don't want to actually take control of their decisions and do something about it. So I think we need to prioritize and then set boundaries around our prioritization. And that can really help us too, to make sure that, we're not putting ourselves in a place of just Triggerville,
With fear, you have to move forward. There's no way around it. We need forward action. So like you were saying before, taking little small baby micro steps is really important because it builds the momentum and motivation. Fear paralyzing you will just continue to make you feel stuck. And I'm not saying don't take some time to process what you're going through, whatever the change is. So maybe your office has said you have to come back in 5 days a week. You don't want to do that. It took you a while to get used to home. And now you don't like that. yes, you might have to take a few weeks to process that before you make that decision. Do I want to leave? Do I want to talk to HR and ask for a hybrid? What do I want to do? But you can't stay stuck for too long. Otherwise, you won't move, and then you'll lead into the victim mentality that you don't have an option. And we do. And the option might be that you start your own business, or you become a consultant and you freelance so you can do it from home, or you get a job somewhere else or start your own business. There are options. But again, it's okay to take some time to process it. We call that the gap time, right? So you're going from like an old chapter, or, the last chapter to a new chapter, old identity to a new identity. And in the middle of that transition, whether it's a planned change or a change that was thrown upon you that you didn't know, you want to take that time to self-evaluate who you are at the moment, what you want, what's important to you now, what are your values now? Because when you started the job, maybe 4 years ago, maybe 5, maybe 10, you're a different person. We're always changing and shifting personally and professionally. So what do you want today? So you don't have to make a move at the moment, but the one baby step might be doing a self-evaluation, might be talking to your coach or talking to friends and brainstorming what they think is best for you, or just writing it in a journal and starting processing the information and taking those small steps to get to the place you want to be. That's
Yeah.
important. We just don't want to be stuck.
That's a great point. And you were saying before about the fear, and I kind of got this vision in my mind that if you've never had boundaries before, and this is all
Right.
new to you, I'm thinking of fear as like a big bubble, right, on one side of you. And then the boundary setting is just this blank open space next to you. The more you test it, the smaller this bubble is going to get, and the bigger the boundary space is going to get. So you're going to shift that balance. And so don't worry about it. Like, it's okay if the fear bubble is really, really big. When you start that, it's going to be like letting air out of the balloon. It's going to get smaller and smaller the more and more you practice it.
Oh, absolutely. Practice is definitely key. Remember, you can ask yourself a mindfulness question. Am I making this choice or decision based on fear or ego? Because the ego gets involved. Or am I making it out of love, meaning a very conscious choice filled with clarity and focus? Or is it fear? If you notice that you're making a decision or a choice and it's based on fear or ego, don't do it. Don't make that, because then you end up regretting it. Those are the choices that you make that are out of, fear. You make out of impulsivity, not well thought out, anger, and then you regret it, and then you build that vicious cycle. But if you take the time to process it and go, okay, am I making a really good decision that it's well thought out, I have clarity and focus on it, then you'll feel that you're coming from a better place, and it won't feel as fearful because it's a clear vision. So take your time, whatever it is. We don't want like years and you're still stuck, but if you need those days and weeks to figure it out, or like I said, you need just taking the step to saying, maybe I should get a coach, or maybe I should talk to a therapist, or I should get a book on this, whatever it is, that's a step. It doesn't have to be, I quit tomorrow and I start my own business. It could just be, I'm open to the choice of calling a coach and discussing this and seeing where I want to go. And that is a step. And that's a great first step. Or whatever it is for you. Everybody has a different first step, but take it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's someone to hold you accountable. It's someone to test the waters with. It's someone to take risk with. It's someone to kind of hold your hand and guide you.
Right.
So it's a very
Form
safe
trust.
space.
Yeah, we need that trust. And sometimes when you're going through a change and fearful, you don't know who to trust, especially if it's, it could be, if we're talking about friendships and somebody has hurt you, that trust wall could go right back up, whether it's an intimate relationship or a friend or even family. Work is a little different, but personal, it can really knock you down with trust. So if that's the case, therapy and coaching really builds the trust. There's unconditional positive regard. And not that we will tell you, hey, that's not good for you. We will, but we won't abandon or reject. And sometimes that's what we need. We need somebody who builds us back up and that we can form that relationship and that trust with in an unconditional environment. So sometimes that is the best first step. And again, looking at it, is it coaching or is it therapy? They're two different things. Or is it just, I need a friend? But making sure you make that first step. Who can I talk to? Who can I brainstorm with? Who's unconditional in my life? Because if you go to somebody and they reject, abandon you, or they're very harsh, judgmental, critical, the wall will go back up and then you won't want to open up, because then you feel shameful or guilt, and that's not a healthy place to be.
Yeah, that's a great point, because also if people are trying this and it's new, it's just feedback. I always say, let's change that F word around. It's not failure, it's feedback. And so it might not be perfect out of the starting gate, right? But people people might not respect your boundaries as soon as you start doing it, because they're not used to you being someone who sets boundaries. So you may have to set your boundary over and over again with a particular person, and it might escalate to a point where you just have to call it out. Normally, as we shift, the people around us will shift, right? As we start to set boundaries, they'll just unconsciously pick up on the energy, but sometimes they won't, especially like family members that may have been used to, treating people in a certain way for years and years and years. They're like, well, what's this about? So it's okay. It's okay. You can just take it little by little. Don't say, I tried it once and it didn't work, so I guess this boundary thing isn't for me. No, it is for you. You just have to learn the skill set. Like if you went to get your degree, your college degree, you wouldn't show up for class day one and say, oh, this is hard, I'm not going back. Of course not. It's a journey. It's the same. It's a journey. And like you said, it's great to have someone help you along on that journey, just like we have teachers in college. We have people to help us along in our journey through life as well. So we're coming up at the end here. I just wanted to know if people wanted to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that? I do have the link to your website in the Facebook post.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you that too. Yeah. How should people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
I have my new website, so I'm really excited. So you could go there. It's just dianelang.org. And on there, you could sign up for a free book. I have a free ebook, so feel free. And it gives tips on mindfulness and happiness to sign up and get the free book. Or my email's on there, and you can feel free to email me if you have any questions or thoughts or anything I can help you with. And thank you so much, Joanne, for having me today. It's been great to be back.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you again. We are gonna head off into our VIP lounge for Q&A and hot seat coaching. So we're gonna sign off from Facebook. I just wanted to say, if this is all interesting to you, I do have a year-long group coaching program called the Leadership Transformation League, and we are going to be covering boundary settings in our May session. We meet once a month. So if you'd like more information on that, just give me a little note in the comments there, and I will see everyone next month, where I am going to be talking about imposter syndrome with Barry Forward. That's another juicy topic.
Big issue. Yes, that's another one. That's a big one.
Thank you so much, Diane. I'm not saying goodbye. We're going to continue, but thank you so much for being here on the Facebook portion of it. This has been really educational. I love it. And we're going to sign off with Facebook, and we're going to go into our VIP lounge.